Nice to see you.
Can I sit over there? Because I can only hear out of one ear. Is it?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
All right, now I'm sandwiched here.
Good morning.
I am truly bipartisan. In any case, well, gentlemen, great to see you. So, at Bloomberg, we're in the news business, and so obviously, from a news perspective, one of the interesting things that apparently is going to happen today on this very issue is that House Democrats are going to present a plan, 7-year extension and increasing the lending cap. Before we get to each of your respective reactions to that, I want to very briefly ask each of you, and I'll start with you, Senator Graham, how did we get here? How did we get to this point where this is such a contentious issue, briefly?
Money. This issue 10 years ago was voice voted. Have you noticed there's not been an uprising by American bankers saying, shut down this bank, it puts us out of business? What's happened on my side of the aisle, and this is mainly generated on my side of the aisle, there's been an ideological war declared on the Ex-Im Bank because it's not ideologically pure. I would like a world where the government wasn't involved in terms of manipulating the market forces at all. But the reality is that this bank makes money for the taxpayer. This bank is responsible for creating thousands of export jobs. We're going to reform this bank. But the reason we're all here and your businesses are in jeopardy is because people in special interest groups have declared war on the bank. They're raising money from ideologically driven, nice people to shut this bank down to show how pure they are. And here's what I would suggest to you. I'm glad you're here in Washington. You need to push back. You need to fight back because your employees and the people who work for you need your voice. And I am here to tell you, from a conservative point of view, shutting this bank down in light of what other countries like China and France do is unilaterally surrendering to foreign opposition. That's not remotely conservative. And of all the things in a $3 trillion+ budget we could pick on, picking this bank makes absolutely no sense to me.
Senator Donnelly, you're a former small business owner. You obviously bring a different perspective, both politically and presumably from a background perspective. What do you see as the way forward here? What needs to get done that will satisfy folks on either side of this argument?
Well, first, I agree. Actually, I have the same perspective as Lindsey on this. This makes perfect sense. The most important thing we can do today that all of you can do is go visit the offices of the different members. I used to be in the House before I was in the Senate. And people always go, oh, you listen to this huge company or that huge company. No, I listen to the companies from my state, from my local district. When you come in, you're my friends and neighbors. You're who I see at church. And when you look me in the eye and say, enough with the ideological fights, enough with trying to prove a point. We have 47 friends and neighbors who are going to lose their jobs if you don't step up and approve this. That's what this is about jobs. Canada provides help, China provides help, all these different countries provide help. All we're asking is to be on the same playing field as other countries. And if we can be on the same playing field, we'll win every single time. And we don't see objections from the banks. We don't see objections from other financial institutions because this is doing what nobody else will step up to do. And in my state of Indiana, we have small business after small business after small business that has been able to create opportunity and success. And at the end of the day, when we talk about conservative, moderate, what's more conservative, common sense, and moderate than making $1 billion in profit and paying down the deficit with it? It seems to make sense to me.
So you've been around these parts for a while.
Yeah.
You've gotten stuff done. What's it going to take specifically, do you think, to get this reauthorized?
Every bill we vote on in Congress is a jobs bill, our job. You need to make sure that people from your congressional district and your state understand what it would mean to your business and your employees if we unilaterally surrendered and shut down the Ex-Im Bank. got to make it better politics to be for this bank. If you shut the bank down, how many jobs would you create? 0. If you shut the bank down, how much money would you save? You would lose money. So this makes no friggin' sense to me, quite frankly, that we're even having this discussion given the way the world really is. But what I can't stress to you enough, that your presence here and your continued presence will be needed to counteract forces. There'll be phone call after phone call after phone call. There'll be threatening letter after threatening letter, threatening a primary to anybody who votes for this corporate welfare. This is not corporate welfare. 25% of the loan portfolio goes to small businesses. This allows American companies to export in a competitive fashion, and the export market is increased by 20% with a fairly stagnant economy. So this is all politics. This is not reason. There's no academic debate going on here. This is sheer politics. Right. And this fly-in is going to counteract what the other side is about to unleash on members of Congress. Make sure that every member of Congress knows who you are and what's at stake for your business.
One other thing I'd mention is mention to the different members how many veterans you employ, how many people who are coming back that have served our country that you want to hire and put into a good job. And then say, do you want to take that chance away from them? You all have done extraordinary work in making sure our vets who come home have a chance to have a good job and take care of their family. That's what this is about. They're good jobs, making families' dreams come true. And in case after case, one of my home state companies, Abro, from my hometown of South Bend, Indiana, they sold products in Nigeria. They sold products in the Middle East. There wasn't a bank in the world at the time who would ever take that kind of risk on. But XM did. They now have become a much, much larger, much, much more successful company, employ people all over the world, and banks have stepped in and have picked up some of that lending now that they see it and there's less risk to it. And so this is a win-win-win for vets, for people coming home, for the banks, for our entire economy, and we just don't want to be caught flat-footed.
So, Senator Graham, you've said that there are certain things that could be changed or altered, some reforms. Specifically, what do you think needs to happen, and maybe more specifically, what do you think needs to happen that will sort of convince your colleagues to make this happen?
Well, we're lowering the amount of exposure that the government will be subject to by lowering the lending cap to $135 billion. We're creating a CEO for ethics management, CEO for risk management that will be non-political. We're having more transparency to the bank. We're increasing the amount of small business participation, that 25% of the loan volume has to go to small businesses. We're doing some things that I think are really legitimate requests from members who would like to see the bank operate in a more efficient fashion. Since 2005, we've generated about $3.7 billion for the American taxpayer. So the reforms that I'm working on with Senator Kirk, I think are in response to legitimate concerns by members on both sides of the aisle. Reform, yes. Shutting the bank down, no. And the one thing I can tell you, the French and the Chinese hope we shut this bank down.
Yep. From your perspective, Senator, what reforms make the most sense for you, for your constituents, and for your colleagues? Well,
the increase in the small business percentage is very important. It continues to make our point, which is that so much of this is helping our small businesses have success. Many of them are subcontractors to larger companies, might not be in a position to continue their operations if they don't have a chance to do this. And so that's what I would continue to talk about. And as Lindsey said, the governance of it has been tightened up significantly as well. This is one of those situations where you look and you go, why won't you take yes for an answer? That everything you want has been done. This does nothing but provide opportunity, and it has helped us to have $3.7 billion in profits to the government that can then go to pay down debt or for other purposes. And so you look and you go, it's like having a perfect kid or close to a perfect kid, and you know, the child at one point when you're giving them a hard time, look it up and go, well, what else do you want from me at this point?
And one thing I would challenge you to do, look in the budget and see if you can find a program maybe not as efficient as this.
Right.
Of all the things we do at the federal level, this is the great sin? You know, Ronald Reagan said, tear down this wall. Ronald Reagan stood up for America. You know, Boeing makes jets in South Carolina. GE makes engines and turbines in South Carolina. Yeah. We've got a lot of small businesses in the supply chain in South Carolina. There is no way in hell I'm going back to South Carolina and say, hey, we shut down a bank because people ideologically objected to the bank. And the reason you've lost these plants is because companies overseas doing the exact same thing have a bank. The Chinese have lent more money under EXIM financing than the United States, France, Germany combined. Canada has a larger loan volume. So here's the point for me from a conservative point of view. It makes money for the taxpayers. It gives us a chance to compete in the international marketplace. And as long as a communist dictatorship has a EXIM bank, we're going to have one, because I'm not going to put people out of work in Indiana and South Carolina from some ideological reason not connected to the world as it exists. And the burden's going to fall on your shoulders as well as Joe and myself to make that point. There is no reason for this bank to be put out of business as long as other people have one that could put you out of business.
And if I could, absolutely, if I could say one other thing to that, which is this. If Ronald Reagan were here today, he was very conservative, but he's also very practical. And if he was sitting next to Lindsey, I'll give Lindsey a plug. He'd say, Lindsey's a really good senator. That's what he'd say first. But then he would also say, so here's the deal. You're not taking any business away from banks who want to make these loans. And they go, no. And you want to give us $3.7 billion to help pay down the debt. And you'd say, yes. And then he'd look and go, where do I sign this deal? That's what he would say. And that's the position we're in.
Yeah, welcome to Washington, where this is a hard problem.
So we're going to hear a little later in the morning from about a global perspective from a former Secretary of Commerce, former ambassador to the UN. Put this in some global perspective for, you know, you've mentioned, both of you have mentioned sort of other big countries who do this. How does this fit into the larger kind of trade ethos right now, I guess?
I can put it in perspective very easily. You will lose market share to other countries because you won't have access to competitive financing. The product you make, let's use Boeing, for example, the 787, and you should buy one. We'll give you a 10% discount if you buy one today. Jim may not like that, but I just sold a bunch of jets. So what happens is that when Boeing or GE or somebody in Indiana is competing in the world marketplace, and you got Airbus on one hand, you got Boeing on the other, and in the distressed part of the world where there is hard to get traditional financing, the Airbus manufacturer can get loans from EXIM financing from 3 different countries that are in the supply chain, and you just can't compete. 20% increase in export volume in the U.S. economy because people like buying our stuff. We make really good stuff. But at the end of the day, the financing really does matter, and if it's not competitive on the financing side, you will lose market share. So if you wanted to hurt the export potential of America and the developing world, shut this bank down. China, France, and other countries will eat our lunch.
Yeah. 45 seconds. You get the last word.
When you look at a global perspective, other countries look at this, and they can't believe we're having this discussion. They go, this is the most ridiculous thing we've ever heard of. And they are very, very encouraging of the people who don't want this to happen, because what this does is it helps create American jobs. And this is the job will either be here or somewhere else. I would rather have it in Indiana or South Carolina than in a country somewhere else. And so they look, and it's not only on this subject. I mean, there are other subjects. Lindsey and I were fortunate enough, we were just in a few countries in the Middle East together, And they look at us sometimes and they go, we can't believe you're doing this, or we can't believe you're doing that. Well, this is one of those things where they go, this is incredibly dumb, and they are cheering that this doesn't happen. And their cheering it doesn't happen is just one more reason we should hope it does.
Gentlemen, we're going to leave it there. Thank you so much for your time this morning.
Much.
Really appreciate it.
Thank you, sir.
Thanks a lot.